this morning in the basement of the Presbyterian Church in the kind of the social rooms, talking to George Gould. I'm Ken Stockley, and Melvin Mitchell is operating the video camera, and this is part of the Earlville Historical Society project to record members of our community so that there'll be a video record of them for succeeding generations. The date today is July 5th, year 2000. I know we did this a number of years ago. I was just talking to Melvin. It was about 1987 or 88 when we talked to a lot of people, and a lot of them are gone now. And we got thinking we ought to keep this up because time keeps slipping on. Well, George, it's good to be with you in this project, and I've known you a long time, and I know you've been a member of the Earlville community for I guess about ever since you were born. Have you always lived in Earlville, George?
Except for the time I was in service.
Yeah.
And 2 years in Iowa.
2 years in Iowa?
Service, yeah.
Oh, were you?
I came back. I left for the service in March '42, and I came back to Iowa because that's where my wife was working.
Oh, where were you in Iowa?
In Fort Madison first.
Fort Madison?
And I got a job there in the locker plant, and they built one up in Fairfield, and they sent me up there to manage that one.
Well, I never knew you were in Iowa. I always thought you were. I thought you were in Earlville all the time. My wife's from Iowa, and I know I went to school in Iowa, so I've got some good a lot of good people in Iowa too.
Right. And then in 1947, Carl wanted me to come back and get my old job at the Earlville Locker.
Well, that's when you
So I resigned out there and came back.
came back here. Maybe we ought to, before we start on that, get very far in the locker plant, we ought to find out who your parents were and where you were born. I guess we'll go back to the start a little bit.
Well, my mother was Lita Butterfield, and my dad was, his name was Herbert Pliny, but nobody ever knew him except by Bert.
Bert Gould, that's right, Bert Gould, I remember, yeah. Now, did you always, was their home place, was that the home place out there east of town?
Yes.
My
dad bought that in 1908.
I don't know what road that is now. It's out by Co-op.
14th, I believe.
14th Road. It's out there across from the Co-op fertilizer plant. You bought that in 1908. When were you born then?
I was born there, in that house.
In
1910.
1910. Okay.
And,
so you'd be 90?
I'll be...
Close to it.
Let's see, yes, I'll be 90 in December.
90 in December. Okay. December, what is your birthday?
December 11th.
December 11th. Good.
Well, the leader says it's December 10th.
Oh, well,
My birth certificate is 11th.
take your pick. Your parents, did your parents mostly live around here before then?
Yes, my mother just lived up the road. The house is gone now, but it was a house just south of the main line of Burlington. And her parents lived there, and brothers and sisters.
Well, let's see. You had some. You had brothers and sisters. Herb was a brother.
Yeah.
How many brothers?
I had 3 brothers.
You had 3 brothers. Who were they?
Well, Herb was second, and Gilbert was third.
Yeah. And
Eddie Ray came along as kind of a tag.
Eddie Ray, yeah. I remember Eddie Ray, yeah. Did you have any sisters? Or?
No sisters.
No sisters. 3 brothers.
We were the sisters of the family.
Yeah. Eddie Ray was, I remember Eddie Ray better probably because he might have been closer to, maybe he was in school about the time I was or something. I remember him better.
With your daughter.
Could be, yeah.
We bought the Jeep.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Not the Jeep.
Volkswagen.
Volkswagen.
Well, you had, then, how many kids did you have?
I have 3.
You have 3. And who were they?
Well, that's Linda, who's married to Pat Raymond,
Yeah.
and they live in New York. And Lori Jean, married to Norman Roberto, and they live in Northfield, Minnesota.
Minnesota.
And they have 3 little girls.
Oh, yeah.
Linda had one boy, he's, let's see, I think he turns 30 this year. And he's in the United States Army Band in Washington, D.C.
And then you had a boy?
And then I have Howard,
Howard,
who has 2 boys and a girl, and they live in Zeeland, Michigan.
Michigan. Howard's the one that bought the Volkswagen.
Yeah.
From I had an old Volkswagen that my kids went to high school, and when they finished high school, Howard bought the Volkswagen and
Finished wearing it out.
finished wearing it out. It was pretty wore out when we got it, but anyway, it's a good starter for him anyway. Well, let's see. I better look at some of my notes here. Where'd you go to school? I guess that'd be the.
Well, I started in District 311, which they called it the Boozle School.
Oh, the Boozle School.
Yeah.
Yeah, out in the country, one-room school.
One-room school.
Yeah, I know that one well. Yeah.
And, went to 1st grade, and then starting in 2nd grade, they had the influenza epidemic, and they closed the school. There were only 3 or 4 of us, I think, going.
That must have been in the 20s,
Yeah.
probably.
And,
Probably 10, 7,
19, I think.
19, 18, 19. I remember my dad talking about that too. Yeah.
And I can vaguely remember going for a while and came to town. I was in 2nd grade there.
Oh,
And then they opened the school again in the next year.
well, who were some of your teachers you had there?
Oh. See, your sister-in-law, Frances.
No, I had my mother. Frances Whitaker was my
Frances
mother.
is your mother. Okay.
Frances Whitaker was my mother.
There we go with
Jack
ages.
Myers talks about her too. Was Jack in school out there about
Yeah.
that? Yeah. Okay.
He was a little younger than I am.
And
Let's see, I'm trying to think whether she was the first teacher or whether it was Janet Boozle.
Boozle, yeah, one of the Boozle girls was a teacher. Well, that was always the Boozle school because they lived right there close.
And then one of the other, your mother was the first teacher, and then Jane. She taught 1 year, I think, and then Jane came.
Okay.
And she taught till I was in the, I think, 5th or 6th grade, and they hired Harriet Schmidt.
Oh yeah.
For,
I remember we used to call her Hattie Schmidt, but not to her face.
And she walked from town out to school.
Oh.
Always had the fire going.
Oh yeah.
In the winter, cold weather, she was out there and had the room all warm.
Coal stove and yeah.
The old pot-belly stove.
Yeah, yeah. I remember that. I went to one-room school. I went to the Dinsmore School up north of town. We'd have to make sure the blackboards were clean and washed off, and that was quite a job for a teacher.
The thing about that school, the old cedar posts and iron bar rails are still there.
That fence around it.
Fence
right.
around the school.
Oh, that's the original. That's the same ones that were there. Well, that was well made, wasn't it?
Yeah, and those are the same trees.
Same trees.
When I was in school. They were a little younger then.
It's made over into a residence now, but the same building is there.
They picked it up and turned it around.
Oh, did they?
Where it was.
Oh.
And it's a house now.
Yeah, it is. It's made into a house, but I remember it was always a school for as long as we had one-room schools out in the country. Well, did you go to high school then, George?
And, we had back then they had 8th grade final exams.
Mm-hmm.
And we took those over at the Cox School.
Oh, yeah.
And can't remember who else was there, but I do remember Ralph Cuckoo.
Uh-huh. Now, is that over on Route 34?
Yeah.
There's a Cox School?
That's another mile east.
Yeah.
And then started high school in the fall.
Here in Earlville?
In
Yeah.
Earlville.
Yeah.
And one thing, I guess I could call it an embarrassing thing. My folks bought me a suit, my first suit,
Uh-huh.
for 8th grade graduation.
Uh-huh.
In the summer, I grew 6 inches.
Oh.
And I had to wear that suit the first year of high school. Any party that went on, I had to wear that suit. And the pants caught me in the middle of my calf.
You had high pants at the ankles, huh? I know kids grow. That's about the time when they grow fast.
Yeah.
About the 7th, 8th, 9th
That's
grade.
when I put on my skirt.
Yeah. Yeah. And who was superintendent here when you went to school?
Professor Taylor.
Professor Taylor.
He came, I think he was, Professor Mann left in 1924, and Taylor came in 1925.
He made quite an impression on this
He
community.
really did.
didn't
He was quite a community citizen.
I was fortunate to have him superintendent for, I think, maybe 1 or 2 years when he was just going out when I came to high school. But I realized what a educated man he was and what a good superintendent he was. He had what was it he taught? Science? Would he teach science or chemistry and physics and that sort of thing? In addition to being a superintendent of school. Of course, the school was smaller in those days. But were you in the new school?
The office was a little tucked up place by the left of the west side
Yeah,
stairs.
well, now that's the new school. I mean, were you ever in the old school, one across the road?
Oh, yeah.
In high school, or
Yeah, I started over in the old grade school building.
that's about when they changed. They built the new one. Then.
Let's see. I started in 1925, and in 1927 we moved into the.
So you got to be in both the old one and the new one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember. I remember that about that time there was a changeover, and then they used the old one for the grade school for a number of years until it finally got to be too bad a shape, and finally took it out. Well, we better keep going on. We don't want to take all morning at this. Did you graduate from high school then?
Oh, yes.
Oh, you did. A lot of people in those days didn't. They only went a year or two, you know,
Yeah,
and
that's
then went
right.
to work.
Both my brothers,
Yeah,
Herb and Gib. Well, Gib never did start.
yeah,
And Herb, I think, went till he was a sophomore.
yeah.
And of course, then when Ed came, he went off. So.
Yeah. Did you have a good scholastic record, or did you just scrape by?
Without bragging, I was, I think I had possibly mostly A's.
Is that right? Well, good, good.
And,
Did they have?
George Myers and Albert Tillman and
It's in your class?
Lois White, Albert and Lois both moved up from, they graduated in 3 years.
Oh, but they were kind of the same graduating class.
Same graduating class, and they were, all of us were different tough.
All pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good.
Each one tried to
Outdo the other. Yeah, yeah. All had a good record after that too. How many about were in your class anyway?
I think there were 19.
19. Well, that's more than I thought, because some of those earlier than that, some of the classes were fewer. Melvin, we're going to take a minute out to take a drink of water. I'm getting a little dry.
Get a chance to blow my nose.
The butchering trade, did that have to do with your family having that?
That was kind of result of family training. My dad had a country running works. He picked up dead animals and processed. And of course, I worked with him from the time I was big enough to hold a knife.
That's when you got started, yeah.
And I got started, and after the crash in '29, a lot of people wanted to do their own slaughtering, and they weren't handy enough at it, so they asked me to come out and help them. And from that, I had developed quite a little winter business going around.
Just on your own?
We called it tree butchering.
Oh, yeah, yeah, out under the shade tree.
Up in the corn crib or under a tree.
Yeah.
And then when Carl and his crew built the locker plant,
That was Carl Pierce?
Carl Pierce, they invited me to come in, and they said, we just want you to keep on what you're doing, only you slaughter and bring them into the locker plant. They didn't have a slaughtering facility there at that time. So I still butchered in the country, but I had a tripod on the back of my pickup truck.
Oh, yeah.
And picked up the animals and slaughtered them on the farm, and then brought the carcass in.
Bring them in to process.
Covered it up with
Yeah.
wet sheets.
Yeah,
Keep
sure,
it clean.
sure. Well, that was about in the 30s, wasn't it?
Yes, yes.
I remember when it started. That was a big occasion in this town to get a cold storage locker plant. I mean, you didn't have to can, the wives didn't have to can the meat anymore.
Right.
They could freeze it. That was really something.
That was one, I think it was about the second or third plant in Illinois.
Well, was it that?
The one in Amway was built before,
Oh.
and I can't think what the other one was.
Well, I remember going in there as a kid, and it was cold. We really got out of there in a hurry. We didn't stay in there too long because we weren't dressed for it, especially in the summertime. Did you work there pretty steady then, all along?
Well, that was just a part-time job. They'd list the jobs, and I'd take care of them. And Pick Richards was the first manager.
Oh, Pick Richards, yeah. What was it? His name wasn't Pick, it was something else.
Corey.
Corey Richards.
Corey Richards.
Yeah, but Pick was his nickname. Yeah.
Nobody knew what Corey was.
Yeah.
He had worked for Casey Jennifer and Casey's Market for quite some time before that. And,
Irene was his wife.
Yeah.
Irene, she was a school teacher for years.
and she was bookkeeper.
Oh, she was the bookkeeper for the locker?
Oh. Casey was a little upset because Pick let to go down there. Said never would amount to a darn, and fold up. But it was very long after.
Oh, that was a big asset to the community.
Yeah.
But you left there to go out to Iowa then?
No, then.
Or was that
when
before?
Pick resigned. Let's see, the locker opened in July of 1937.
37.
And then Pick resigned in, I think, late 1938 or 39, probably the end of 1938, and they asked me to come in and manage it.
Okay.
So I took over the whole operation.
Oh, okay.
Did the meat cutting and the slaughter.
The whole thing, yeah.
So we did. Started out doing slaughtering on Tuesday and Friday, and they still slaughter on Tuesday and Friday.
They still do it the same way.
Same days.
And that was ever since the late 1930s,
Yeah.
probably about 1940. You went to the service then.
Yeah. And then
That was when?
1942.
42.
March 1942, went to the service. Got married in January.
Oh yeah, yeah. We don't want to forget that. You got married. That's right. Who did you marry?
Evelyn Maureen Heath.
Heath.
A girl who was born in Missouri,
Oh.
lives in Iowa,
Oh.
and had moved to. Her father and mother were divorced. Her mother remarried a Santa Fe engineer.
Oh, I see.
And that's why they were at Fort Medicine.
How did you happen to meet her?
He got a better job and they decided to move to Chicago.
Oh.
And they'd be on on the other end
Of the railroad,
railroad
yeah,
section.
yeah,
They ran from Chicago
to Fort Madison. That was probably the Burlington, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, that was.
Santa Fe?
Yeah.
Santa Fe, okay.
And, so then.
Did you
we
meet
were
her?
living up there, and Bill Moyer, Bill Moyer's wife.
Pat?
Who became Bill Moyer's wife.
Pat, wasn't it?
Came out to visit her grandparents, the Siemens.
Oh, yeah.
And Bill got a crush on her. And then between them, they decided I should have one of her friends.
Oh, you need
So she brought two of her friends out.
get a blind date for you, huh?
And got me a blind date.
Take your pick, huh?
Take my pick. And it so happened that I chose Maureen.
Yeah, great.
And that was in July of 1941.
Mhm.
So sort of, we had a short courtship, really.
Well, that was during the war. The war started then, right?
The war started
In December.
December 41.
Yeah.
And so we decided we better get married. And I was going to have to be called to the
Sure,
service.
sure.
So we got married on January 25th, 42. And I left in March.
Were you overseas or?
And, yeah,
Yeah.
trained in, let's see, I got my basic training in Camp Chaffee. Went from there to Camp Young, California.
Mhm.
And on up to Camp Cook. And then, let's see, I was part of the 3rd Armored Division.
Mhm.
And when they moved the 3rd Armored east to go overseas, they split the, I was in the truck company.
Oh, yeah.
And they split that truck company off, and all truck companies became independent.
I see.
So we then became, 30.
You were transporting.
Yeah. I was trying to think what the company was.
Whatever the number. Well,
Yeah.
at any rate, you were in a
So
transportation,
I was in the transportation corps.
group, yeah.
And went overseas in the transportation.
Were you in the Far East then, or?
No, we went to Europe.
You went to Europe?
Yeah.
Okay.
We were over there. Let's see, we went overseas in May, I believe. And we were stationed at South End of England, down South England.
I see.
Or actually, that was the staging area into France. And then on June 6th, D-Day, June 20th,
Yeah,
we
that's
went
right.
over to France.
Oh, so you went over to France then too? Yeah.
We were, you could still hear the big guns firing.
Oh,
We weren't over 20 miles from the front.
oh, you were close to the front, yeah.
And as the front moved, we moved.
You moved along. So, and you were in till the end of the war then,
I was in
about
there till the end of the war.
1945 or somewhere in there?
45.
Yeah.
And I was released, well, November 30th.
November 30th.
I was dismissed from there.
Did you come back to Earlville?
Came back to, no, I came back to Iowa, Fort Madison.
Oh, Fort Madison.
That's where my wife was.
Oh, that's where,
She was
okay.
working at Parker Penn.
So that's where you went back to, yeah.
And they were going to get me a job in the railroad, and I said, I didn't think I wanted a railroad job. And the local locker plant was looking for work, so I got a job there.
That's when you were in the locker business in Iowa.
Yeah.
But you didn't stay there too long.
I was there until, as I said before, we came back to Earlville in the end of 1947.
47.
Carl, 1948.
And then you were back in the locker,
Yeah.
you come back in the locker then in Earlville, yeah. Before we get too far away from it,
I can get some locker history.
well, locker history would be Carl Pierce started it.
Yeah.
And was,
It was his,
got some other names here, Larry Gast, Chester Heckathorn, were they involved in it, or helped start it, or what?
Carl didn't have the money to build it.
Yeah.
It was his dream
Mhm.
to do it,
Mhm.
but he got money from these fellows to, and they organized the corporation.
It even got Elmer Boston and Father Hahn. Is Father Hahn instrumental in it also? Bob Strong?
Yeah.
A number of people were behind the project.
Yeah, they had shares in it,
Yeah.
and it was the Earlville Cold Storage Locker Company Incorporated.
Janet, was Janet there from the start, pretty much too?
She took over when Dick left.
Oh.
His wife left with him,
Oh, yeah.
and they hired Janet for the secretary, bookkeeper, and meat wrapper, and
Yeah, yeah,
general factor.
yeah. And you were pretty much with the locker from then on, weren't you?
Yeah.
When did you retire from there?
Oh, let's see.
Not too long ago.
Howard graduated from college in 1980.
Yeah.
That's when I quit working full time.
Yeah, but you kept coming back for when they needed you, which was a lot, I remember.
Came back. They said you can't quit. You got to come back and train somebody. Well, we had let's see, Bill Budak, I think was.
Yeah.
Had come along. He came 1950s, 1950.
Mm-hmm.
Right, fresh out of the Korean War.
Yeah, Bill was there quite a while.
And he was there.
Yeah.
And so then Bill left and went to work for the Deliver Mail.
That's right.
They needed somebody to come in and oversee the slaughtering.
And so
I was back there.
So you were back again.
I
Yeah.
can't remember whether I was off at all, but
Yeah.
I came right back very shortly.
Well,
And,
it's been a great asset to the community. I know that. Maybe we better get into the city hall of business too. Your political career. You were always active in the community, I know.
well, I got involved in that in 1950 or 51. Someone said, we need an alderman. Can't remember who it was in 1950. I don't even know now who I succeeded.
You ran for alderman?
I needed somebody to run it, so all I had to do was get to my ballot, get the necessary signatures,
So
and I was elected.
Never was a lot of people that would commit themselves to the time and energy it took to be a
That's
an
right.
alderman.
It ran at the outset. Didn't take it too seriously.
Yeah.
Wasn't too much going on. But then wasn't too long till everything started happening.
Became more
Fix the
important.
Streets, we had to build streets. We had, and then in 1970 we had to rebuild the sewage plant.
Who were some of the mayors you worked with? Were you in when Dr. Yabsley?
Charles Dias.
Charles Dias, yeah.
And then when he's gone, I think, I don't know whether, I think Carter.
Carter?
Yeah. Not Jeff, what was his name? Forrest brother.
Howard.
Howard Carter.
Howard, yeah, Howard Carter,
Howard
sure.
Carter.
Yeah,
And I think when he became incapacitated, Dr. Yabsley.
Dr. Yabsley, I figured he was in there part of the time. Wasn't it when Dr. Yabsley was in, they raised the street up?
Yeah,
On the
that's when we raised the streets up at the top.
Before then, the streets were down so that you could pull the horse and buggies up to the sidewalk.
And still out of the bucket.
And in that area, they raised the streets up so the automobiles could park there a little easier. I remember that. And let's see, after Doc Yabsley, he was Orrin Sturgeon.
He was there, Doc was mayor for a couple of 3 years, I think.
Quite several years.
Several years.
Then Orrin was.
And Orrin Sturgeon
Quite a
came
while,
on.
yeah.
And he was mayor until, well, did Wexman
Might have been,
beat him out?
might have been, yeah.
I think Wexman beat him out.
But you've seen a lot of changes in the community.
Yeah. Changes in mayors and changes in how they handle things. And
The sewage plant, that's always been
that's been
a problem. Never
we're
seems,
under the horse's croup all through history.
never seems to be big enough that,
Never big
well, even today. Let's take another break, Melvin. Getting back to some of the highlights in your life, George, I know you've been real active in the church, teaching Sunday school and everything. What would you like to, what do you remember mostly about church?
I don't remember too much about it. I remember joining the church in 1929.
That's the Earlville Presbyterian Church.
Earlville Presbyterian Church.
Right.
We, Professor Taylor and what was the leader man's name?
Oh, George Myers? Was
No,
it?
the editor, the
Tabor?
old editor.
Tabor?
Tabor.
Tabor, yeah.
P.B. Tabor.
Yeah.
And,
Melvin's helping us out every once in a while. That's good, Melvin. We need some help.
couldn't think of it. I'd never taken too much interest in church until I was in high school. And Prof. Taylor and Mr. Tabor invited a bunch of us over to Tabor's house, a bunch of us boys. And I ended up, I don't know, we had probably 8, 10, 12 boys. And had a basketball team. Carl Marshall was
Oh, yeah.
big wheel in that.
Carl Marshall, sure.
Went around. And then about the time I graduated from high school, somebody said, well, you ought to join the church. So I said, well, can't think of anything better to do. And so we were joining. And we had a supply minister, young student, and all of us kind of thought he was really something.
You liked him.
So then came down to when I joined, and they had some little geezer come in because the student minister he couldn't operate as moderator of the session. So I was really disappointed, thinking I thought I was running the church for that nice young minister.
Yeah.
He was a soul guy. So anyway, that got me going, and needed a Sunday school teacher in the junior high, 6th, 7th, 8th grade then, and they were a handful.
Oh, you taught Sunday school then?
Yeah.
Oh.
So my wife took over the 7th and 8th grade, and she had the ones that ran her out of the office every morning.
Oh.
And I had junior high, so
Uh-huh.
they were a pretty good bunch of kids. Bill Latimer and Atherton boys.
Oh, yeah,
some of
sure.
those. And,
You taught quite a while?
They had quite a while, I think, probably up until, well, and all our kids were coming along.
Sure,
So
so you kept,
really kept interested.
and then you were active in the church otherwise
Right
too?
up until I went to service.
Yeah, but you were on the church board and so on, everything?
Well, I hadn't got any boards.
Oh.
Joined the Masons in 1936.
Oh, yeah.
And that took a lot of time.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, I went to service, and that was the end of everything. They elected me Master of Masons in the year that I went to service.
Oh, you were.
So I served 3 months as master.
You started as master anyway, yeah.
And, then when I came back from service, 1951, the church tapped me for elder.
Oh, yes.
And I was ordained, I think, in 1951. And was elder as often as I could be elder, then clerk until
Sure.
1980 or somewhere along, up in the 1980s.
Were you in the Mariners too?
Oh,
Mariners group?
Mariners tapped me. I wasn't in the Mariners early, but later on they said, well, you and Maureen ought to be the mayor.
Is that kind of a social group
Social
in the church? Yeah, I've heard a lot about the Mariners and been to some of your meetings even over the years. I thought it's a real nice, real active group in the church.
In 1960, they needed a director out at the cemetery. So Alfred Clanton, Ray Boozle, I think, came in as
Precinct Cemetery?
Precinct Cemetery. How would you like to be on the Precinct Cemetery board?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I don't know much about it. Well, we'll teach you.
Now that's a township
Township
office.
cemetery.
Yeah.
And at that time, well, from the beginning of the time that it became a township cemetery, in 1898, yeah, 1898, the township decided well, they had filled up the old original cemetery.
There to the north part, yeah.
The north, they needed more space, so they bought what is now the cemetery, the whole cemetery.
But more land.
About 17 acres.
Oh.
And so Alfred was getting along in years, and couldn't get around too well, so he sort of tapped me for taking over the books and selling lots and so forth.
Yeah, I remember you did that for a long time.
That was on them.
Whenever anybody wanted to know where their lot was, they went to George.
Comes George, yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody has to know where those
That's
are.
right.
The records,
That's right.
whether you know where they are or not.
That's it.
And
Are you still on the cemetery board?
Getting along in years, I decided I should get off there while I could still be around to help whoever took over.
Okay.
So I resigned in 98.
Oh,
90,
not too long ago.
tried to resign in 1996. 1996.
96.
And I couldn't find anybody to take my place, or they didn't find anybody. So I kept on until finally 1988, this is it,
Yeah.
I'm leaving.
So is that when Peg Carter and
Yeah.
Sandy Gast
Yeah,
and
that's when Sandy played.
Sandy, yeah.
Peg and I and, can't even remember who was on now.
Well, I know Peg Carter was on.
Yeah, Sandy,
Yeah.
yeah. And so then I got off.
Well, it's been another important part of the community because I know when you want to look up your past history, you need someone that knows who's located where out there.
I guess I was a little like a bulldog. Anytime I got appointed to a job, I just held on.
You did
until
it.
I outgrew it.
You did it, George. You really did. Well, George, we're going to have to wind this up pretty soon. Is there anything you think of that that you'd like to mention while we're talking? We've covered quite a few areas of your life.
Well, as I look back, growing up as a little kid, my dad had an old Maxwell and then gave up the Ghost, and we didn't have a car for 3-4 years in the teens. And of course, during the war, we didn't have a car anyway. So we had a horse and buggy.
Horse and buggy, yeah.
And we farmed with horses.
Sure.
The little farming that we did. And then gradually came along, tractors came, cars came, airplanes came.
What was your first car?
The first car that I drove was a Ford.
The Ford.
In fact, that's what I learned to ride on.
Oh.
1924 Ford.
24 Ford.
Sedan.
Oh, yeah.
With the glass windows
Yeah.
raised up.
Yeah. That would have been a Model T?
Model T.
Model T. Yeah.
And,
The automobile made a lot of difference
It sure did.
in the community, and also the tractors and the change into.
and as I look at them now, we thought when the first tractors came, that was really something.
Yeah,
And now the tractors have outdid the original tractors.
yeah, you don't see many horses used on the farm anymore, but
No.
you do see a lot of them used for riding. Well, I think this has been very enjoyable, George, and I hope you've enjoyed it too, and we'll thank Melvin and thank the Historical Society for the chance to do this.
Good.
George?